The scorching wind howled across the shattered ramparts of Fort Ethel, carrying with it the reek of ozone and incinerated ceramite. Commander Valerius gritted his teeth, the dust gritty against his tongue, his knuckles white as he gripped the plasma rifle. Below, the city of Magna Progenium burned, a mosaic of orange and red against the perpetual twilight of the war-torn sector. Their scanners, what little remained, screamed with impossible energy readings. This wasn't a standard Xenos incursion. This was something far, far worse. Status report. Valerius barked into his voxcaster, the static biting at his ears. His eyes, narrowed to slits, scanned the swirling, impossible energies tearing apart the sky. Energies that defied every known principle of the Imperium. They were not greenwah energy, nor the cold, void-like hum of Necron technology. This was a maelstrom of iridescent light, twisting reality as it descended. "Outer perimeter breached, Commander," came the frantic reply from Sergeant Kale, his voice strained. They're everywhere, not moving like anything we've seen, just appearing." Valerius watched as a section of the outer wall simply unmade itself, dissolving into shimmering dust without an explosion, leaving a gaping hole through which more of the enemy poured. They weren't soldiers, they were abstract horrors, shimmering forms that defied clear description, sometimes like twisting motes of pure energy, sometimes like grotesque shifting shadows. They moved with a silent, unnatural speed, their touch annihilating matter. "Fall back to the secondary line," Valerius ordered, his voice steady despite the tremor in his gut. "Maintain defensive fire. Do not engage hand-to-hand." Their touch, its instant negation. He knew the futility of the command even as he gave it. His men, the proud 103rd Cadian shock troops, were well drilled, but nothing in their training prepared them for foes that erased existence with a brush. He saw a guardsman scream, not from pain but from sheer terror, as his arm simply ceased to be, dissolving into nothingness. The man collapsed, a silent, gaping hole where his limb had been, then his chest, then his head. Valerius raised his plasma rifle, charging it, and unleashed a searing bolt at one of the closer entities. The bolt connected, and for a fraction of a second, the iridescent form pulsed. Then it shimmered, reforming itself entirely untouched. Despair, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of Valerius's resolve. What was this, the warp? Some new horrific manifestation of chaos? No, the warp had a certain feel, a particular stench of corruption and madness. This was different. Clean somehow in its destruction. Clinical, like a surgeon carving out a tumor, but the tumor was everything they knew. "Commander, look!" Kyle's voice ripped through his thoughts. Urgency, overriding discipline. Valerius looked up, his gaze drawn by an unnatural silence that had fallen over the battlefield, replacing the roar of battle with an oppressive void. High above, where the sky should have been, reality itself seemed to be peeling back like an old scroll, and through the rent a figure descended. He was a man, seemingly, yet no man Valerius had ever seen. His raiment was crimson and gold, flowing with an impossible elegance that defied the physics of descent. His hands were bare, holding nothing, yet power radiated from him. A silent, suffocating presence that dwarfed the raging psychic storms of any sorcerer lord. Around him, the iridescent destroyers froze, then simply vanished, like dust motes caught in an unseen vacuum. The figure landed softly on the highest spire of the fort, directly across from Valerius's position. He looked down at the burning city, at the struggling, dying forces of the Imperium, with an expression that was not malevolent, but weary, almost regretful. He raised a hand, and with a gesture, the impossible, shimmering maelstrom that had been tearing Magna Progenium apart unwound itself, folding back into a pinpoint of light that winked out of existence. Silence. Utter, profound silence. The enemy was gone. The impossible energies vanished. Only the burning city remained, a testament to the horror that had just occurred. Valerius stared, his mind struggling to process. Who was this being? An Imperial saint? An unknown Xenos god? His every instinct screamed danger, yet a part of him, A deeply buried, desperate part clung to the sliver of hope the being represented. The figure turned his head slowly, his gaze sweeping over the remaining defenders on the ramparts, settling finally on Valerius. His eyes were ancient, filled with a sorrow that transcended worlds. This is not where I intended to arrive," the figure's voice echoed directly in Valerius's mind, not through his vox, not through the air, but inside him, clear and resonant. "And this is far worse than I feared." Valerius felt a cold dread wash over him. He was not a savior. He was something else, something that knew of the destruction. The figure called himself Stephen Strange. He spoke of multiverses and dimensional incursions, words that meant nothing to Valerius, and even less to tech priest Dominus Rho 701, who stood rigidly beside him, his metallic appendages whirring softly as he processed the impossible. Strange, clad in his crimson cloak that seemed to possess a life of its own, sat cross-legged on a shattered piece of plasteel, his gaze distant. "I made a choice," Strange began, his voice still echoing in their minds, not spoken aloud. "A desperate gamble to contain an infection that threatened my own reality. I thought I could excise it, purge it from the multiversal fabric before it spread." He sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "I used a spell of incredible scope, a banishment that was meant to simply delete the offending pocket dimension." Rho 701's optical sensors flared. "Delete, such a concept is illogical. Reality cannot simply be erased. It can be transmuted, atomized, but not undone." Strange looked at the tech priest, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. "In my world, reality is far more malleable than you understand. And the infection, it was not truly a reality unto itself, but a cancerous growth, a cancerous story, fed by pure, unadulterated suffering, a place where the very concept of hope had been starved to death." Valerius felt a chill seep into his bones. "You speak of our reality?" he managed, his voice hoarse. Strange nodded slowly. "I banished what I believed to be a pocket dimension, where the primordial energies of chaos had taken root, threatening to seep into other realities. An alternate universe, perhaps, where the entities known as the Chaos Gods reigned supreme and unopposed, feeding on despair and war, growing exponentially. I cast the spell to seal it, to erase its very existence from the tapestry of what is." He gestured vaguely at the stars, now visible through the vanished chaos. "I intended to sever it completely." Rho 701 emitted a series of rapid, high-pitched clicks. "You imply that this banishment resulted in the dissolution of our physical laws? The erratic appearances of nothingness? The disintegration of matter?" "The spell worked," Strange said, his voice laced with self-reproach. "Too well. What I perceived as a contained dimension was, in fact, an entire cosmic setting. A vast, complex universe, your universe. My banishment spell didn't just seal it off. It began to unravel it, from its edges, inward." Valerius stumbled back a step, the full horror of the statement washing over him. "Unravel? You mean everything? Our suns, our planets, our lives?" "Yes," Strange confirmed, his gaze fixed on the burning city, but seeing something far beyond. "I have created a wave of non-existence, a cosmic cancer that is eating its way through your reality at an exponential rate. The entities you saw, the iridescent destroyers, they are not invaders. They are the leading edge of the unraveling. They are the universe trying to delete itself piece by piece." The implication was a physical blow. Their universe was dying, not from war or plague or Xenos, but from a spell cast by a man from another reality, a man who now stood before them, a walking harbinger of their ultimate demise. "How long?" Valerius asked, his voice barely a whisper. Strange closed his eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "When I arrived, I felt the temporal distortions. The rate of decay is accelerating, based on the residual energies of my spell, and the feedback I'm getting from the multiversal pathways you have, perhaps a few weeks, maybe less. Then, everything you know, everything that exists within this reality, will simply cease to be." Poof. The words, so flippant, hung heavy in the air. a grotesque mockery of their existence. Poof. Row 701's internal processors whirred frantically, struggling to compute such an impossibly vast, universe-ending catastrophe originating from a single, external source. This is beyond our capacity to comprehend. Our reality is based on fundamental principles of existence, of cause and effect. A spell cannot simply unmake an entire cosmic structure. But it did, Strange said, opening his eyes. A glint of desperation there now, and I don't know how to reverse it. I banished it, I didn't create it. My spell only sealed the door, but it seems the door was the foundation of your house. A new, cold terror settled over Valerius. This was not a battle they could win with bolt rounds and plasma. This was not an enemy they could see or fight. This was the end. And the man who brought it felt remorse, but offered no solution. The news, delivered by Voxcaster and whispered among the beleaguered defenders, spread like a terminal plague. The universe was ending, not by the hands of Chaos or Xenos, but by an arcane accident. Commander Valerius watched his men, their faces etched with a new, deeper despair than any battle had ever brought. The endless war, the eternal vigilance, the sacrifice. It all meant nothing if reality itself was being unwritten. Strange stood beside him, watching the horizon. He seemed to sense Valerius's thoughts. "It's not meaningless," he said, his voice still echoing in Valerius's mind. "The struggle, the sacrifice, it defines you. Even if it is ultimately erased, it was, and the echoes of such resolve can ripple through other realities, other times." Valerius scoffed. "Empty platitudes. My men fight for the Imperium, for the Emperor, for humanity's survival, not for some echo in a reality that isn't theirs." "Perhaps not," Strange conceded. "But right now, the only chance you have for any survival, for any continuation, is for me to understand what I did. And to do that, I need to understand your reality. What sustains it? What defines it?" "You want a tour?" Valerius asked, a bitter laugh escaping him. "This entire Imperium is a war zone. We are nothing but cogs in a cosmic machine of endless conflict and suffering. That is our definition. And that suffering, that conflict, it's what fed the original infection I sought to banish." Strange mused, his brow furrowing. "The more I see, the more I realize this reality is intrinsically tied to the forces I was fighting. Chaos, the great game, the warp." Row 701 stepped forward, his bionic eye whirring. "The Empyrean, or warp, as you refer to it, is indeed intrinsic to our existence. It is the realm of souls, of emotion, the primordial ocean from which all psychic power is drawn. It is also the abode of the ruinous powers." "Yes, the ruinous powers," Strange murmured, his eyes distant. "Nurgle, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, Khorne, the entities of pure, unadulterated suffering and emotion. The infection, I banished them. I believed I was severing a cancerous tendril from the multiverse, but it seems I severed the root. So, your spell, intended to eradicate the Chaos Gods, instead erased the entire universe they inhabited," Valerius summarized, the words feeling like a death sentence. "Exactly," Strange confirmed, a new grimness in his tone. "The universe you inhabit, it appears, is woven into the very fabric of their existence. They are not merely invaders or parasites here. They are, in a twisted way, foundational. By destroying them, I initiated the destruction of this reality." This realization brought a chilling new dimension to their impending doom. It wasn't just an accident, it was an act of cosmic euthanasia. The universe dying because its very definition was deemed too dangerous. "There must be a way to reverse it," Valerius insisted, clinging to a desperate hope. "Some source of power, some artifact, some loophole." Strange turned to him, his expression one of profound weariness. "Perhaps, if this reality is so intrinsically linked to these ruinous powers, then perhaps a manifestation of their opposite, or a primordial force that predates them, could offer a counterspell. But I am limited here. My own magical energies are struggling against the unraveling. I am a stranger in a strange land. and this land is actively trying to unmake itself. You need to understand our magic, Valerius said, a flicker of an idea sparking in his mind. Our psychers, our navigators, our emperor. Strange looked at him intently. The emperor? Is he a being of such primordial power? A counterforce to these ruinous powers? He is the god emperor of mankind, Row 701 stated, with absolute conviction, his voice devoid of emotion, yet resonating with faith. The psychic bulwark against the darkness, the light that guides us through the Empyrean. His will alone holds the Imperium together. Then he is where we must begin, Strange concluded, a flicker of purpose replacing the despair in his eyes. If this reality is to have any chance, I need to reach this emperor, and quickly, before there's nothing left. The journey to Holy Terra, the heart of the Imperium and the resting place of the emperor, was not just a journey across parsecs, but a race against non-existence itself. The void was not empty. It was filled with whispers, with the faint hum of dying stars, and with the growing, insidious silence of reality unraveling. Inside the cramped confines of the Fatesworn, a battered but defiant Imperial Navy frigate, the tension was a palpable weight. Commander Valerius stood on the bridge, his eyes glued to the main view screen, where the familiar pinpricks of light that were distant stars seemed to flicker, sometimes simply winking out of existence. Strange stood beside him, his gaze fixed on a small, shimmering orb he held in his hand. It was a projection, a miniature representation of the leading edge of the unraveling, depicted as a gnawing purple-black wave eating its way through a holographic star chart. Every few seconds, another star, another cluster, another entire segment of a galaxy would simply vanish from the projection. "It's accelerating," Strange murmured, his voice tight. "The closer we get to the core, the faster it consumes." "The core of what?" Valerius asked, his gut clenching. "The core of this galaxy, or the core of your initial spell?" "Both, I suspect," Strange replied, looking up from the orb. "My spell, originally targeted at the heart of the Chaos dimension, is manifesting its destructive wake from that same conceptual point. The denser your reality is with its Chaos essence, the faster it seems to be unmaking itself." Row 701, strapped into a control station, his metallic fingers dancing over a cogitator interface, suddenly let out a series of alarmed binary chirps. "Commander, anomalous energy readings, massive, unprecedented fluctuations. Not a void storm, it's localized. Directly in our path. On the main view screen, a new anomaly appeared. Not the shimmering unmaking of reality, but a roiling, tempestuous storm of pure psychic energy, impossibly vast, churning with colors that hurt the eye. It pulsed, expanded and contracted, tearing at the fabric of space-time. What in the Emperor's name is that?" Valerius breathed, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. Strange's eyes widened. "That's a pocket of concentrated Empyrean, a raw psychic storm. And it's not natural. It's feeding on the unraveling." "Feeding?" Row 701 questioned, his optical sensors glowing. "How can a warp storm feed on the absence of reality?" "It's not feeding on the absence," Strange explained, a new urgency in his voice. "It's feeding on the decay, the raw emotional energy, the terror, the despair of billions of souls as their reality dissolves. It's a feast for whatever dwells in that storm. And if it's drawing power from the very process of destruction, it could become an unstoppable engine, accelerating the end even faster." A chilling thought struck Valerius. Chaos, it's chaos, isn't it? Even as you unmade them, they found a way to manifest, to capitalize on their own undoing. Strange nodded grimly. "It appears my spell wasn't truly an eradication of chaos, but a deconstruction of the reality that contained it. The essence of chaos, the emotional imprint, it's still here. And now it's lashing out, weaponizing the very end you face." The storm grew closer, its immense presence making the Fatesworn shudder. Alarms blared across the bridge. Navigation readouts flickered wildly. "We cannot avoid it, Commander," the helmsman yelled, struggling with the controls. "It's too vast. Our Geller field is failing under the pressure." "The Geller field," The Imperium's only protection against the raw, soul-devouring horrors of the warp began to flicker, dimming, then flaring with sickening irregularity. Valerius knew what that meant. The barrier between reality and nightmare was collapsing. Strange stepped forward, his eyes blazing with unfamiliar resolve. There's no time to go around it. We have to go through it. If we can reach the heart of that storm, I might be able to find the nexus point, the source of this accelerated decay. If I can't reverse the unraveling, perhaps I can slow it, or at least understand its deeper mechanism. Through a raw warp storm? Are you mad? Valerius snapped, the sheer suicidal nature of the plan shocking him. No vessel can survive that unshielded. We'll be torn apart by demons and psychic backlash. You'll be torn apart by non-existence anyway, Strange countered, his voice sharp. This is your only chance. My magic is strongest when focused on a tangible source of the problem. This storm, this new manifestation of chaos feeding on the apocalypse, it might be the key, or it might be the end. Valerius stared at the roiling chaos on the screen, then at Strange's determined face. A choice, certain slow death by unmaking, or a desperate suicidal gamble against the unleashed horrors of the warp. Prepare for penetration, Valerius bellowed, his voice cutting through the alarms. All hands to battle stations! Activate emergency Gellerfield protocols. Lock down all access points. We're going in! The Fatesworn shuddered violently as it plunged headlong into the heart of the warp storm, the Gellerfield struggling to maintain its integrity against the impossible forces pressing in. On the bridge, the lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with unseen life. Valerius gripped the command throne, his knuckles white, his gaze fixed on the view screen, now a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and swirling energies. Gellerfield integrity at 30%. Row 701 shrieked, his voice distorted through the vox. Psychic echoes overwhelming internal dampeners. We are exposed! Suddenly the air grew cold, heavy with a stench of ozone and raw meat. Horrific, guttural roars echoed through the ship's internal vox. On the view screen, not through the glass, but directly onto the screen, as if it were a window into another dimension. Leering, fang-filled faces pressed against the failing barrier. Demons. Strange stood firm, his hands raised, weaving intricate patterns of golden light in the air. The light pulsed, coalesced, forming shimmering shields around the bridge crew. But it was a temporary ward, a magical plaster against an ocean of unleashed psychic horror. They're coming through, Valerius roared, drawing his plasma pistol. Even with Strange's protection, the sheer pressure of the warp was a physical agony, a cacophony of whispers and temptations that sought to tear at his very soul. They are projections, Strange said through gritted teeth, his brow furrowed in concentration. Mere extensions of the storm's will. The true nexus, it's deeper. We must push through. The ship was assaulted, not just from the outside. Manifestations of pure terror began to appear within the ship itself. Walls warped. Crewmen screamed as their minds shattered, their bodies racked with unseen torments. The Fatesworn was dying, piece by piece, not physically, but psychically. Valerius fired his pistol, plasma bolts searing into a shimmering skeletal figure that had materialized on the bridge. It shrieked, dissolving into smoke, only for 3 more to appear in its place. His men, the few still conscious, returned fire, their laser guns and bolt pistols carving futile arcs of light through the horrors. Hold the line, Valerius yelled, his voice strained. For Terra! For the Emperor! Strange, meanwhile, was pushing past the psychic assaults. His gaze focused, his hands moving with incredible speed, not in attack, but in observation, in calculation. He was analyzing the storm, the very fabric of its existence. I see it! Strange suddenly cried out, his eyes blazing with emerald light. A tear, a direct conduit to the source. It's a nexus of pure, concentrated destruction. An imprint of my spell, but twisted, warped by the Empyrean. It's growing! On the view screen, amidst the roiling chaos, a single point of absolute, crushing darkness appeared. It was not merely black. It was the absence of light, the absence of everything. A vortex that swallowed the warp storm itself. It was the heart of the accelerated unmaking, a wound in reality itself, feeding on the very nothingness it created. That is where my spell is manifesting its true, destructive potential, Strange said, his voice now imbued with a newfound, terrifying certainty. That is the center of the unraveling, the core of this universe's demise. We must reach it! To what end? Valerius demanded, reloading his pistol, sweat stinging his eyes. What can you do against that? I don't know, Strange admitted, his voice raw with desperation. But if there's any chance to reverse it, to even understand it, it's there. If I can reach that nexus, I might be able to sever its connection to the rest of the universe, contain it, or at least buy us time. But we must go directly into it. The helmsman, his face pale and contorted with fear, wrestled with the controls. We can't, sir. The ship she won't hold. We're already breaking apart. We have no choice. Valerius thundered, pointing his pistol at the black vortex on the screen. Ramming speed, helmsman. Full power to engines. We go directly into the breach. The Fates Worn, already battered and dying, shuddered. Engines screaming in protest as it surged forward, driven by the desperate will of its commander toward the heart of oblivion itself. The black vortex grew, consuming the ship, consuming the demons, consuming the very light around them. As the last sliver of reality outside their desperate vessel winked out, Valerius heard Strange utter a single chilling word. Here. Then, everything went black. The blackness that swallowed the Fates Worn was not the comforting dark of deep space, nor the oppressive gloom of a tomb. It was an active, consuming void, a screaming absence that tore at the very fabric of Valerius's being. He felt his consciousness fragment, scattering like dust motes in a gale, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer, annihilating pressure of non-existence. His body, his thoughts, his entire existence seemed to stretch, thin, and then snap. There was a moment of pure, blinding terror, a realization of ultimate erasure, and then nothing. Then, a jolt, a sudden jarring return to sensation. He was still there, slumped against the control throne, his head ringing, his stomach lurching. The bridge was dark, save for the faint flickering emergency lights and the pulsing golden aura emanating from Stephen Strange. The screams of demons were gone, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. The smell of ozone and fear still clung to the air, but the gnawing cold of the warp had receded, replaced by an even colder, deeper chill. Valerius pushed himself upright, his muscles protesting. "Report!" he croaked, his throat raw. Row 701, miraculously still strapped in, his optical sensors dim, responded with a series of weak clicks. Internal integrity compromised. Geller field entirely gone. Propulsion offline. Life support critical. We are adrift. But in real space? Strange lowered his hands, his face pale, beads of sweat glistening on his brow. The golden light around him faded. He looked exhausted, as if he had held back the tide of non-existence with his bare hands. We are in a pocket of stillness, he said, his voice strained, still echoing in Valerius's mind. The eye of the storm, the nexus, my spell's core. Valerius looked out at the main view screen. It was no longer a maelstrom of color, but a vista of impossible beauty and terrifying emptiness. Swirling around them like an endless cosmic vortex were fragments of galaxies, nebulae, and entire star systems, frozen in a silent, agonizing dance of dissolution. They weren't disappearing, they were unbecoming, their essence bleeding away into the absolute blackness that surrounded their small, damaged ship. The view was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly horrifying. It was the universe dying, captured in a single devastating tableau. This is it then, Valerius whispered, the immensity of it all pressing down on him. The end. Strange shook his head slowly. Not yet. We are at the very threshold of it. The black vortex we saw, it was the true manifestation of my spell, twisting through the warp. A point of absolute deletion. When we entered it, my magic instinctively reacted, creating this localized bubble of suspension. He gestured at the swirling cosmic graveyard outside. For now, we are shielded from the direct unraveling, but the forces are immense. This bubble cannot last long. What did you learn? Valerius asked, clinging to the slim thread of hope. Strange closed his eyes, concentrating. The spell wasn't just a banishment, it was an erasure protocol. I designed it to find the defining characteristics of the target dimension. In this case, the Chaos Gods and the energies of suffering they embody, and then to sever that connection from the multiversal tree. But this universe, it didn't just contain chaos, it was born from it, woven into its very fabric. The primal emotions, the raw psychic energy that flows through the Empyrean, it's not just a byproduct, it's the very bloodstream of this reality. My spell tried to remove a cancerous tumor, but it turned out the tumor was the heart. Row 701 emitted a low, sorrowful whine. The logical conclusion is grim. If the ruinous powers are foundational, then their removal necessarily unweaves all that is built upon them. Precisely, Strange confirmed. And the unraveling is not just physical, it's conceptual. The laws of physics, the flow of time, the very idea of existence, it's all tied to that primal, chaotic foundation. That's why the entities you saw were so abstract. They were the conceptual framework of reality dissolving. So, there's no way to reverse it? Valerius asked, the despair returning. Strange's eyes snapped open, a glint of determination replacing the weariness. Reversing it completely would mean bringing back the very thing I tried to banish. Essentially, recreating your universe with chaos at its heart. I don't know if I can do that, or if it would be a moral choice, given what I know of the suffering it causes. But we don't have a choice, Valerius argued. The alternative is total annihilation. There might be another way, Strange said slowly, his gaze distant as he seemed to look beyond the immediate dying universe. If this reality is built on chaos, it is also defined by the struggle against it, by the will to resist, by the hope, however faint, that persists despite the darkness. And that points to your Emperor. The Emperor is the antithesis of chaos, Row 701 stated, his voice gaining strength. He is the light, the order, the ultimate psychic bulwark. Exactly, Strange affirmed. If the ruinous powers represent the foundational chaos and suffering, then your Emperor, the psychic anchor of order and defiant will, represents the counterbalance. He is the ultimate expression of this universe's struggle to define itself beyond pure chaos. My spell saw the chaos, but it didn't account for the conscious, overwhelming will that resists it, that tries to forge order from it. So what does that mean? Valerius pressed, a sliver of desperate hope rekindling. It means that if the Emperor's power is truly the opposing force, the one thing that conceptually holds this universe together despite the chaos, then perhaps my spell can be recalibrated, Strange explained, his voice growing more confident, more focused. Not reversed, but redirected. Instead of deleting the chaos, and by extension the universe, I could potentially link the essence of this reality not to the Chaos Gods, but to the Emperor's own power. Make him the new conceptual anchor. Valerius stared, his mind reeling. You mean you could rewrite reality using the Emperor as the foundation? In a sense, Strange nodded. It would be an immense undertaking. A spell of such magnitude that it would rival the original banishment. It would require a direct, unmediated connection to the Emperor's full power, a connection even I might not be able to withstand. And the risk if I fail, this bubble collapses, and everything is instantly unmade. There will be no second chances. Then we must reach Holy Terror, Valerius declared, the purpose returning to his voice. His despair momentarily banished by this audacious, impossible plan. We must connect you to the Emperor. But how? The ship is crippled. We're stranded in the eye of oblivion. Strange looked around the damaged bridge, then at the swirling cosmic abyss outside. My magic is designed for dimensional travel, for manipulating reality. It can hold this bubble, but not propel us across parsecs. We need an engine, a conduit for that kind of spatial traversal. Something that can navigate this collapsing reality. Something with a strong enough will. He looked at Row 701. Your void ships navigate the Empyrean through a conscious navigator, yes? A psychic guide? Row 701's optical sensors flared. The navigators are mutants, psychers with the third eye, capable of perceiving the currents of the warp and steering vessels through its treacherous depths. Without them, interstellar travel is impossible. Then we need a navigator, Strange concluded. And not just any navigator, one powerful enough, desperate enough to pierce through this conceptual nothingness and find the true path to holy terror. One whose will is absolute. A grim realization dawned on Valerius. The Fatesworn carried a navigator, but she was in the Geller field dome. During the initial breach, she was exposed to the raw warp. We lost contact. We need to find her, Strange insisted. She is our only hope. Her connection to the warp, however perilous, is our bridge. Valerius nodded, pushing past the pain and the fear. Row 701, can you establish contact with any of the ship's internal systems, specifically the navigator's chambers? The tech priest whirred, his metallic appendages already working. Attempting internal Voxcaster bypass, signal integrity poor, warp residue immense, but I will try. The silence of the Nexus, however, was about to be broken by a new, insidious sound. A faint, high-pitched keening began to echo through the silence, growing louder, more insistent. The light from Strange's aura flickered. What is that? Valerius demanded, clutching his plasma pistol. Strange's face hardened. The Nexus is unstable. My bubble is weakening. Whatever chaos remnants still exist, whatever lingering echoes of the ruinous powers that were not completely unmade, they are sensing the vulnerability. They are trying to pierce this veil, to consume what little is left, and they are using the collective despair, the sheer terror of this dying universe, as their weapon. Outside the bubble, in the cosmic abyss, the swirling fragments of dying galaxies began to coalesce, forming grotesque abstract shapes like leviathans made of dissolving starlight. They pressed against the invisible barrier, their silent screams echoing directly into Valerius's mind. They're trying to break in, Valerius realized, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. They are trying to become the new conceptual anchors, Strange corrected, his voice urgent. To claim the void left by my spell and manifest their power anew, feeding on the destruction itself. They will make this the ultimate realm of despair. We must find the navigator, and quickly. Row 701's efforts bore fruit. A crackle of static, then a faint, distorted voice. "Ello, is anyone there? The darkness it consumes, navigator," Valerius shouted, leaning into the Vox. "This is Commander Valerius." "Identify yourself. What is your status?" I am Elara," the voice responded, tinged with a fragile sanity. "The Geller field failed. My chamber it is breached. They are here, the whispers they cling." Valerius felt a surge of cold dread. "Demons? No worse," Elara gasped. "They are the shadows of demons. The ideas of them, formless, yet infinitely hungry. They wanted to know the fear, the final fear." Strange stepped forward, his eyes closed in concentration. "Navigator Elara, listen to me. This is Dr. Stephen Strange. Your connection to the Empyrean is critical. We need you to guide us to holy terror. Can you do it?" A long pause, then a broken laugh. "Guide? Through this nothingness? My third eye, it sees only the ultimate void. It is beautiful and terrible. It is the end of all pathways. But you are still connected, aren't you?" Strange pressed, his voice unwavering. "You still feel the currents, however distorted. This nothingness still has a direction. It still has an origin point. And we need you to find the strongest beacon of will in this dying universe. The Emperor. His light must still exist, however faint. The Emperor's light," Elara whispered, a hint of awe in her voice. "It is a dying ember in a hurricane, but it is there. A promise, even in this ultimate betrayal." "Then focus on that promise," Strange commanded. "Focus all your will. Find that ember. Guide us there. It is the only way to save anything." Valerius looked at Strange, then at the view screen, where the abstract horrors pressed harder against the shimmering bubble. He knew the navigator's mind was a fragile thing, constantly on the brink of madness even in normal warp travel. Now, surrounded by the conceptual dissolution of reality itself, her sanity must be hanging by a thread. He had to give her something more than a desperate command. Navigator Alara. Valerius boomed, his voice resonating with all the conviction he could muster. You are the last hope of humanity. The Emperor demands your courage! Do not let the void consume us. Guide us, and your sacrifice will be remembered in the annals of history, a beacon against the ultimate darkness. For the Imperium, for mankind! A shuddering breath, then, surprisingly, a surge of strength in Alara's voice. For the Emperor, I will try. But the way it is not through space, Commander. It is through will, through the currents of what was and what could be. Hold fast. The journey will be unimaginable. She's doing it, Strange muttered, his eyes wide. She's opening a channel, a path through the conceptual void. Prepare for extreme strain. This will not be like any warp jump you've ever experienced. Suddenly, the Fatesworn shuddered violently, not from impact, but from an unseen force that warped the very metal of the ship. The emergency lights flared, then dimmed again. On the view screen, the cosmic graveyard began to streak past, blurring into impossibly long trails of fading light. It was as if they were being pulled, not through space, but through a tapestry of unraveling time and memory, rushing past the dying echoes of existence itself. The pressure was immense, crushing. Valerius felt as if his soul was being stretched thin, threatening to rip apart. He heard Row 701 emit a series of agonized shrieks as his delicate internal systems buckled, but Valerius held firm, his gaze fixed on the blurring vortex outside, on the impossible journey Alara was forging for them. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was their last desperate gamble. The journey was a torment beyond any physical pain. Valerius's mind screamed as it was assaulted by fragmented memories of 1,000,000 dying worlds, by the echoes of despair and suffering that were the dying gasp of his universe. He saw impossible vistas of unmade galaxies, felt the conceptual snap of stars ceasing to be, and heard the silent, internal screams of billions of souls dissolving into nothingness. Time became meaningless, distance irrelevant. They were not traveling through space, but through the very idea of space. Collapsing around them, he caught glimpses of Strange, his eyes blazing with an unearthly emerald light, his hands weaving complex patterns that shimmered with golden energy. The Sorcerer Supreme was not merely enduring, he was actively shaping their path, reinforcing Alara's fragile psychic conduit, battling unseen conceptual horrors that tried to drag them into the void. Row 701, his bionic eye glowing with fierce determination, kept what remained of the ship's systems barely functional, a metallic anchor in the storm of dissolution. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The blur snapped into focus. The Fatesworn, battered and scarred, emerged into a space that was both familiar and utterly alien. They were still in the void, but the cosmic graveyard was gone. Instead, ahead of them, vast and impossibly ancient, hung Holy Terror. But it was not the Terror Valerius knew. The planet itself was an angry, swirling vortex of psychic energy, a monumental storm of raw emotion and psychic power, eclipsing anything Valerius had ever witnessed. It pulsed with a blinding golden light at its heart, a light that strained against the oppressive, encroaching darkness that surrounded the system. Around Terra, the very fabric of space was rent and torn, not by the unraveling, but by the sheer, unbridled psychic forces emanating from the planet. By the Emperor. Valerius breathed, mesmerized and horrified. "This is the heart of the storm," Strange said, his voice now weak, hoarse but filled with awe. "This is where the collective despair of a dying universe meets the ultimate defiance. This is the Emperor's light, amplified 1,000,000,000-fold by the pressure of your reality's demise. He is holding back the tide with sheer will," Row 701 confirmed, his voice barely a whisper. "The throne world's psychic emanations, they are off the scale. His will, it burns brighter than 1,000 suns, consuming itself to stave off the end." But the darkness around Terra was also immense, a suffocating blanket that seemed to writhe with insidious, formless power. It was the collective despair, the lingering echoes of chaos trying to snuff out the last ember of hope. The connection to the Emperor, Valerius urged, turning to Strange. Can you make it now? Strange swayed, leaning heavily on a console. The psychic pressure is immense. Even I am struggling to maintain my form here. The barrier around Terra, it's a psychic maelstrom. It would tear me apart if I tried to simply walk through it. I need a conduit, a focus. Just then, a faint, almost imperceptible signal crackled over the Vox. Hild Terra Hope is there. It was Ilara, her voice barely a whisper, imbued with a strange, otherworldly calm. Navigator Ilara, Valerius responded, relief washing over him. You made it! Can you establish a direct link to the Emperor's light? Can you guide Strange through this maelstrom? My sight, it is clearer here, Ilara replied, her voice gaining a fragile strength. The Emperor he is calling. He is aware, he knows. But the path, it is a razor's edge. My mind, it is open to him. But the power needed it will consume me. Strange's eyes met Valerius's. She is offering herself as the conduit, a direct, unshielded link to the Emperor's power, channeled through her. It will certainly destroy her, but it might be the only way. Valerius felt a pang of profound sorrow, but he knew the grim calculus of the Imperium. A single life, even a navigator's, against the fate of the entire universe. Do it, Ilara, he commanded, his voice heavy. For mankind? Yes, Commander. Ilara's voice came, resolute now, tinged with a final, heartbreaking acceptance. For the Emperor, Strange nodded, then closed his eyes, his hands rising. This time, the golden light that emanated from him was different. It was not defensive, nor analytical. It was a spear, a conduit, a bridge of pure arcane power that reached out into the void, seeking Ilara's presence. As the golden light connected with Ilara's chambers, a blinding flash erupted from the ship's depths, followed by a silent, internal scream that resonated in Valerius's very soul. Then silence. Ilara was gone, but in her place, a shimmering golden thread, impossibly bright, now pulsed from the Fatesworn, stretching directly towards Holy Terror. It pierced the psychic maelstrom, a beacon cutting through the despair, leading straight to the golden heart of the planet. The conduit is open, Strange said, his voice trembling, his face contorted in a silent struggle. I feel his presence. It is immense beyond anything I could have imagined. 1 billion souls, 1 trillion prayers bound by a single, unwavering will. This is the anchor. This is the counterforce. He took a deep breath, gathering all his remaining magical energy. I must connect. I must reweave the tapestry. Valerius, Row 701, whatever happens, do not break this connection. Do not allow anything to interfere. This is the moment of Genesis, or the final, absolute destruction. With a final, desperate surge of will, Strange launched himself forward. A comet of golden light that sped along the conduit Ilara had forged, straight towards the heart of Holy Terror's psychic storm. He disappeared into the golden maelstrom, leaving Valerius and Row 701 alone on the bridge of the dying Fatesworn, adrift in the face of ultimate cosmic forces. Valerius stared at the disappearing light, his heart pounding. The Fatesworn shuddered violently as the surrounding darkness, the lingering echoes of chaos, began to press harder against their fragile ship, sensing the monumental struggle unfolding. The keening whispers returned, louder, more insidious, trying to shatter their resolve. They are trying to sever the connection, Row 701 shrieked, his voice straining. The residual chaos entities, they sense the recalibration. They are trying to overwhelm us, to corrupt the conduit. On the view screen, the abstract, dissolving shapes of despair pressed against the ship's hull. Their silent screams now a tangible psychic force, hammering at Valerius's mind. He felt his courage waver, his faith challenged by the ultimate crushing weight of oblivion. He was just a man, a soldier, facing forces that could unmake existence itself. But then, he remembered Ilara, her sacrifice, her unwavering will. He remembered the countless Cadians who had died at his side, fighting to the last breath against impossible odds. He remembered the Emperor, a symbol of defiant humanity against an uncaring galaxy. No, Valerius roared, grabbing a heavy wrench from a nearby console. He didn't know what he could do, but he would not stand by idly. Row 701. Maintain the integrity. I will not allow them to interfere. He began to hammer at the console, at anything that vibrated with the insidious whispers, as if he could physically repel the psychic assault. It was a futile gesture, a madman's defiance, but it was all he had. RO 701, his own internal systems screaming, began to channel what little power remained in the ship's reserves into reinforcing the hull's conceptual integrity, firing off binary incantations that echoed through the bridge, desperate prayers to the machine god. They fought, two desperate figures on a dying ship, against the conceptual forces of the cosmos, maintaining a vigil over the golden thread that was their only hope. The inside of the Golden Throne was a nightmare of failing machinery and raw, barely contained psychic energy. Custodes, the golden guardians of the Emperor, stood like statues, their auramite armor reflecting the eerie green light of arcane devices and the pulsating golden aura of the Emperor himself. Fabricator General Kelbor Hal, ancient and augmented beyond recognition, oversaw the ceaseless, desperate maintenance, his servitors scurrying like mechanical insects. And then Stephen Strange arrived. He materialized within the throne room, not with a grand entrance, but as if he had always been there, a silent, blazing star of golden energy that settled gently before the Golden Throne. His form solidified, but he was barely recognizable, his crimson cloak shimmering with unstable light, his face contorted in an expression of such intense concentration that it seemed carved from stone. The Custodes reacted instantly, their guardian spears lowering, power fields humming. But Strange raised a hand, not in aggression, but in an appeal for stillness. His voice, though silent, resonated within their minds, full of an authority that transcended their oaths. Stand down. I am here to aid your Emperor, to save your reality. Kelbor Hal's bionic eyes whirred, processing the impossible. An unsanctioned Xenos presence, a sorcerer of unknown origin. Custodes, eliminate the threat. But the Custodes hesitated. They felt the overwhelming power radiating from Strange, a purity of intent that conflicted with their ingrained distrust of all things arcane and alien. More importantly, they felt a subtle shift in the Emperor's presence, a faint acknowledgement, a ripple of awareness that they had not felt for millennia. Strange ignored them, his gaze fixed on the Golden Throne. He saw the Emperor not as a decaying corpse, but as a being of immeasurable psychic power, a boundless ocean of will and light, tethered to the reality of the Imperium by an intricate web of technology and sacrifice. He was the anchor, the bulwark, the psychic heart that refused to yield. "You are magnificent," Strange whispered, his voice still echoing directly into the minds of all present. A consciousness forged in defiance, an ultimate counterbalance to the cosmic entropy I unleashed. "I am sorry, my lord. My spell mistook your universe's struggle for its essence, but now we can correct it." He raised his hands, gathering every ounce of arcane energy he possessed, channeling the conduit Elara had forged. The golden light intensified, swirling around him, connecting him directly to the Emperor's consciousness, to the vast, suffering, defiant will that had sustained humanity for 10 millennia. The connection was a shock. Strange felt the pain of a million worlds, the despair of a dying galaxy, the ceaseless war, the endless suffering that had fueled the Chaos Gods. He felt the Emperor's own agony, the burden of his vigil, the torment of his sacrifice, but he also felt the boundless hope, the unyielding will, the fierce love for humanity that burned brighter than any star. This was the true core, the new foundation. He began to weave the spell, a spell not of destruction, but of recreation, a cosmic recalibration. He reached out with his mind, drawing upon the Emperor's boundless power, upon the collective faith of humanity, upon the very essence of defiance. He was trying to conceptually re-anchor the entire universe, to tie its existence not to the primal emotions that fed chaos, but to the conscious, unwavering will of the Emperor. The throne room convulsed. Arcane energies clashed with ancient technology. Psychers shrieked in unison as the fabric of reality itself groaned under the strain. The golden throne flared with an intensity that threatened to immolate everything. Outside the bubble, aboard the Fatesworn, Valerius and Row 701 felt the monumental struggle. The golden thread pulsed wildly, sometimes dimming to a faint flicker, sometimes flaring with blinding light. The whispers of the dying universe grew frantic, pressing harder against the ship, desperate to break the connection, to claim the void. Valerius gritted his teeth, hammering at the consoles, roaring defiance. Inside the throne room, Strange was losing himself in the spell. His form began to ripple, to become translucent. He was becoming one with the energies, a mere conduit for the reweaving of reality. He poured everything into it, his own life force, his very essence. The anchor, it must be strong, pure, unyielding. His thoughts resonated across the throne room, his voice fading. The will, the hope, the Emperor is the new foundation. Then a sudden blinding flash. Not a destructive explosion, but a cosmic surge of pure, golden light that erupted from the golden throne, enveloping Strange, enveloping the entire throne room, and then spreading outward, along the golden thread, across the galaxy, across the universe. For a moment all was pure, transcendent light. The light faded. Valerius blinked, his eyes stinging. The Fatesworn was still there, damaged but holding. The cosmic abyss outside was gone. Instead, ahead of them, holy terror hung majestically, its psychic storm still immense, but no longer a chaotic maelstrom. It was a lighthouse, a steady, unwavering beacon of golden light against the deep black of space. The whispers were gone. The abstract horrors of dissolution were gone. The constant, gnawing dread had lifted. Valerius looked at Row 701. The tech priest's optical sensors were glowing steadily, no longer flickering in distress. "Status report, Row 701, Valerius demanded, his voice trembling with a hope he dared not believe. Row 701's voice was clear, strong, spatial integrity stable, temporal flow normalized, gravimetric readings consistent with Imperial standard. The unraveling it has ceased. The universe is reasserting itself." Valerius stumbled to the main view screen, his hands pressed against the cold plasteel. The stars, they were back. Billions upon billions of steady, shining stars, stretching into infinity. The familiar tapestry of the galaxy, of his universe, had returned. It was still a galaxy at war, still steeped in suffering, but it was there. It existed. "He did it," Valerius whispered, tears blurring his vision. Strange he did it. A faint flicker on the view screen, just above Terra. A shimmering golden motes of light, coalescing, then dissipating, like a final wave goodbye. Strange was gone. His physical form, his individual consciousness, had been consumed by the immense act of creation, absorbed into the fabric of the new reality he had forged. He was no longer Stephen Strange, sorcerer supreme of another reality. He was now a part of this reality, an echo of pure will and sacrifice, woven into the very foundation he had helped build. The golden thread that had linked them to Terra dissolved into starlight. The Fatesworn was truly adrift, a derelict, but now in a living, breathing universe. "Commander," Row 701's voice cut through Valerius's awe. "Incoming astropathic transmission. High priority. From Holy Terra." Valerius composed himself, wiping the tears from his eyes. He was a soldier. He had witnessed the end of all things, and its miraculous rebirth. Now, he had a universe to protect, a duty to fulfill. "Patch it through," he ordered, his voice ringing with renewed purpose. A crisp, authoritative voice crackled over the vox. "This is the Imperial Palace, Custodian Captain Valerian. We have received your ship's distress beacon. Your vessel is designated Fatesworn. You are to proceed to designated orbital rendezvous point. You will be debriefed immediately. There are unusual anomalies to discuss. A new error, perhaps. The Emperor, he is stronger, and something new has been woven into the fabric of his light. A new defiance. Valerius looked out at the universe, no longer seeing just the endless war, but the immense potential, the enduring will, the hope that had been forged in the crucible of absolute destruction. Strange had not just saved their reality, he had fundamentally changed it, re-anchoring it to the purest essence of humanity's defiance. He looked at the empty space where Strange had been, the man who had almost unmade them, and then, at the cost of his own existence, saved them. Tell them, Valerius said, his voice firm, that Commander Valerius and the crew of the Fatesworn are reporting for duty, and tell them that the light of the Emperor burns brighter than ever before. The Fatesworn was still, adrift in a vast star-filled ocean, but the universe was alive, and for the Imperium of Man, a new dawn, however grim, had broken. The struggle would continue. The war would rage. But now, there was a deeper, more profound hope, woven into the fabric of existence itself. A hope born from the ultimate sacrifice and the unwavering will of a single defiant soul from another reality. The universe had been rewritten. And in its new story, the Emperor and the enduring spirit of mankind were finally, irrevocably, the true heart of it all.